She goes her own way, like I don't give a damn, girl. And my God, she owns it. So many heartbreaks, goes back to 2014, and I think that she knows it. And if you've seen her, I know that you would believe it, 'cause I know that you'd want her to. Yeah, I do. Everyone's taking their shot, but missing out on.
So first recipe, which you're in my way. I gotta move you slightly. First recipe I'm gonna be making is mac and cheese, because who doesn't love mac and cheese for a side for Thanksgiving, Christmas, just for dinner, no matter what day of the week it is. Starting by boiling the pasta. And when you boil your pasta, you want to make sure you season your water really, really well, because that in end seasons your. Alright, and while that boils, we are going to start shredding our cheese. I got this nifty little shredder the other day, so I donated the one that you do this with. We're gonna try this out today for the first time, and I'm super excited. This might make my life a million times easier. I have 4 types of cheeses, because cheese, it's called mac and cheese. So you got 8 ounces of Gouda. We have 8 ounces of sharp cheddar. We have 8 ounces of mild cheddar. And then we have 8 ounces of Colby Jack. And we are gonna shred all of this to go into our mac and cheese. Freshly shredding your cheese is so important. One, it just melts better, but also it is a lot more financially efficient. So that is why when I saw this shredder, I wanted to get it, because shredding cheese can be a pain. Like, it is definitely a workout. So if I can do something to make this a little bit easier, I am all for it. So that's the Colby Jack. I believe this is the mild cheddar. Oh yeah, this is a million times easier. And I think for one of my next recipes that I'm gonna be sharing with you in this video, I have an idea for this other than cheese. You'll see that later on when I make one of my other sides. I think this is gonna come in really, really handy. There we go. Also, you can use whatever cheese you want. If you don't like Gouda, don't use Gouda. If you want to add mozzarella, if you want to add pepper jack to give it some spice, whatever cheeses you like. The only one I feel like is a must is obviously cheddar. Give yourself some mild cheddar, give yourself some sharp cheddar, and then get creative and use what you have on hand and what you like. All right, I know this is a lot of cheese, but to make a really good mac and cheese, you need a lot of cheese. All right, now that the water is boiling, I just do elbow. Honestly, do whatever you like. Some people are like only elbow, only shell, only whatever. My kids prefer elbow. So I'm doing 2 pounds elbow macaroni in here. And you're just gonna cook this most of the way. It does not have to be completely cooked. It will cook a little bit more when we throw it into the oven. All right, now to start our roux, we're gonna put our pan to medium heat, and we're going to do about 3 tablespoons of butter. Let that melt. All right, and now we are going to season our butter, which some people may find really weird, but it's really important to layer your flavors. So you're going to season as you go, all the layers, so that everything has flavor. Pepper, garlic, And then I love a little bit of a smokiness to my mac and cheese, so paprika, smoked paprika. Mix that around. Let the butter get all flavory and delicious. All right, and then we're gonna add in about 3 tablespoons of flour into our roux mixture. And you wanna mix this and let it cook in the butter for a good minute or two, because you wanna get rid of all the flour taste of the flour. And that just takes cooking it off. So be patient, keep mixing it, and it'll all come together. So that for a minute, we are gonna add 1 can of evaporated milk slowly. That way it can incorporate. And you wanna keep mixing it so it doesn't get clumpy. It's gonna clump a little bit, but as long as you keep mixing it, it should smooth itself out. No clumps, that's a key. Do not want clumpy roux for macaroni and cheese. So whisk, 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 whisk. Then I'm gonna add in 2 cups of milk. You can also do heavy cream. What you have on hand. Heavy cream would be preferred, but it's not the end of the world if you don't have it. So I'm gonna season it again with the same 4 seasonings. Salt, pepper, garlic. I add a lot of garlic and paprika. I like things seasoned well. Then I'm gonna do about a tablespoon of stone ground mustard or Dijon mustard, whatever you have on hand. I don't normally have Dijon on hand, but stone ground mustard, I do. All right, and now when it comes to adding the cheese to your sauce, I'm only using about half of this. I'm gonna add a little bit at a time and let it melt before adding more. All right, here you can see the sauce is super thick and cheesy, which is exactly what you want, but I still have about half the mixture in here, and I'll show you what we're gonna do with that in just a second. All right, and now take your sauce, dump it in with your noodles, all of it, every last drop. We're gonna mix it in here nice and well, so all the noodles get this cheesy goodness all over them. You don't have a cheese pull when you're mixing it together. You don't have enough cheese. Add more cheese. And if you're questioning if you have enough cheese, you don't have enough cheese and add more cheese. And if you think you have enough, maybe just add a little bit more, because you really can't have too much. Also, I did preheat my oven to 350. So just keep that in mind also. Now we get to have the fun part, and we're going to layer our pasta. So I'm gonna put some pasta in. Spread that out evenly. If you wanna know how the food vloggers and everyone get that really nice cheese pull, it's by layering like this. Do a layer of noodles, and then take your cheese. The left of the cheese I wanna make sure is mixed up well. I will put a layer on here. I also know it's really controversial to put breadcrumbs or like butter crackers on top of macaroni and cheese. I personally love it. However, I have family members that don't, so I don't. I say do whatever you want. If you don't like it, don't do it. If you like it, add it. I like textures in my food, so that's why I usually like either breadcrumbs or crackers on top. But Xander and Bjorn usually don't like the crunch texture, so I do this instead, and I don't add it because I'm a good mom. Also, when you're making this, it's a good idea to put a baking sheet underneath it because it does often like to bubble over whenever I make macaroni and cheese, so something to keep in mind. The rest of the cheese on top. Then just put that in your oven for about 30 minutes. 30 minutes should be good till it starts getting a nice crust on it. If you like more of a crust, 1 or 2 minutes on broil will give you more of a crust. All right, now our mac and cheese is done, so I'm gonna pull that out of the oven. You can leave it in here a little bit longer if you want a little bit more of a crust. Once again though, the kids don't love a huge crust on here. So I'm gonna pull it out now, and I'm gonna let it sit for about 30 minutes. That way it can set up before cutting into it. Can you hear that? Hear it sizzling. Don't mind the dirty stove. We'll clean that up later. Mac and cheese. I'm gonna do this totally the wrong way, but I want you guys to get the full effect of the inside of this. So yes, I am going from the middle. Look at that. Cheesy and creamy and delicious. This recipe is a newer recipe that I've trying this year, but it looks amazing. It's super easy appetizer. You start with puff pastry. Got some good sausage, everything but the bagel seasoning, and some melted butter. So to make this, we're just gonna take a sheet of the puff pastry. Basically, this is a super nostalgic thing. We all pretty much grew up with pigs in a blanket. This is the grown-up version of it, and I'm super excited about trying this. I think 1 package of sausage will use both of these roll-ups, which is kind of perfect. I'm gonna cut this in half. And yes, I have not tried this before, but really, puff pastry, sausage, butter, I really feel like it can't go wrong. Basically, pigs in a blanket. So, once I get to the end though, that's when I'm gonna take the melted butter. That way it gets a good seal on it. And then on the top, actually no, let's cut it first. I have my sheet pan out. You know what, I'm gonna put some parchment paper on there to be safe. And just gonna cut it. Butter the top of these. And then I honestly have no idea how long to cook these for, so I'm gonna keep an eye on them and let you guys know. My guess is 350 for 30 minutes, but we'll see. We'll see if it takes a little bit longer or if that's how long. But then I'm going to sprinkle them with this everything but the bagel seasoning, which you could easily leave this off. If you like it, put it on. If you don't like it, don't put it on. This is cooking. There's no exact science to this. I did end up doing half with the everything and half without, just in case the kids don't want it. So, throw that in there as well. All right, so watching the clock, this was closer to 45 minutes. So they had the nice golden brown texture. It looks so good though. Half I did with everything, and then the other half has just the butter on top of them. But it's like I said, grown-up version of pigs in the blanket. Better than just hot dogs and then the puff pastry. Serve this with whatever topping you want. Keep it simple with ketchup. Do some mustard, some special sauce, some barbecue, honey mustard. All of it would be delicious. All right, so this next recipe we're making is fruit salad. This is one that the kids absolutely love. Also, yes, some of these are done in voiceovers because there were just some days that my house was way too loud. So I started with a can of pineapple and peach chunks, and then I'm going to also be cutting up some apples. I love adding different textures of fruit as well as different flavors of fruit into this fruit salad. You can pretty much use whatever you want to use though when doing this. I absolutely love using this chopper when I am doing things like fruit salad. I personally feel like it is really important to have a fruit salad with small chunks in it. I like to make sure that when you take a spoonful of it, you're getting a little bit of every single flavor. So I make sure that everything is cut fairly small and not into too large of chunks. You can see Xander in the background wanted to help me out. I still have a heart attack though every time he helps me cut something up. He is learning knife skills and he is not that great at it yet, but he's learning. So I know if I don't let him do it, he's never gonna learn, but I swear every time he helps me, I just get so nervous. And then just throwing the apple into the bowl as well. And when it comes to measurements, it really depends on how much fruit, different types of fruits you're using, how big your bowl is. It really does vary. I'm using one of the larger bowls I have in the house. Now moving on to the grapes, these you could easily just cut in half also, but honestly I had this chopper out anyway and it's a little bit quicker just to kind of toss them on here and do this than cutting them one at a time, but definitely not a necessary step in this situation. But really, you can have as much fun with this as you want. If you want to add some fresh kiwi or papaya or anything like that, really whatever you want. The blueberries I just threw in here. Yes, all the fruit was washed beforehand. I just wasn't going to show it in the video, but they were washed. And then I was working on the bananas. Another situation of I did not need to use this thing. And actually, it probably would have worked better not to use it because the bananas didn't like to go through as well. But once again, I had it out. It was already dirty, so I was just using it on everything. And Xander was in the background. He was just cutting the green off of the strawberries. We always save that portion. And we don't worry about being too neat with them because this is the birds' one of their favorite treats. So all the little toppers of the fruit and stuff got to go out to the ducks, and they were definitely happy for their little fruit salad as well. And then once you have all of your fruit in the bowl, like I said, you can add whatever fruit you want. This is just the variety I want. I also like to make sure I have a really big variety of color. I always just think that's fun and pretty, but this is why the kids absolutely love it. I add Cool Whip into the fruit salad and it makes a fruit salad with a little bit of a dessert feel, and the kids absolutely love that. Biggest thing to keep in mind when you are making this is you don't want to so much mix as much as fold in the ingredients because you don't want to end up squishing the different fruits and stuff. So I'm really just folding it in to mix it all together and not trying to squish anything. Try to be gentle with it. You don't want to have it all mushy and stuff. I also made this the day before I was taking it over to my aunt and uncle's house for our Sunday family dinner. So I like to make it the night before. That way it can sit in the fridge and all those flavors just kind of mix and meld really well together. And after everything's all mixed together, I add a can of sweetened condensed milk in here as well. And then once again, just fold it all together till it is nice and well combined. I always love a dish like this for the holidays, if it's Christmas or Thanksgiving or New Year's, because it is a little bit more indulgent than just making a traditional fruit salad, but we're dealing with the holidays, but it still adds in that freshness when everything is so heavy. So yeah, it may not be the most healthy fruit salad in the world, but come on, are we really going to be worrying about calories on Thanksgiving? I can pretty much guarantee at our house it is all about the delicious foods and not worrying too much about the calories in them. We can do portion control for that side. And then I just love how pretty it turns out. It's just a really pretty dish to have on the side. All right, this next recipe I'm super excited to share, because if you buy the canned biscuits or crescent rolls or anything, promise me this year you will try this recipe. This is my homemade biscuit recipe and it is amazing. Now, I'm gonna give you the measurements, but I double this recipe because we love it for dinner, but then we always love it in the morning with some fresh jam or butter and honey or anything like that. So I'm going in with 4 cups of flour. Once again though, I am doubling it, so keep that in mind. And then 2 tablespoons of baking powder. Now, my tablespoon measure has been stolen by Bobby for pool chemicals, and I haven't bought a new one. So I'm using a teaspoon one. That's why you keep seeing me over and over having to put it in, but just know it's 2 tablespoons. And then I add about a teaspoon of salt, but I don't measure the salt. I just kind of grind it in there. It is an important thing to add though. Make sure you don't forget the salt. And then I do add a little bit of sugar as well. I don't even know if I completely measure it. I think I do about 2 teaspoons, but that's it. And then if you have one of those little sifters, you can use that and get this to a really smooth consistency. But I just use the whisk to make sure that all the dry ingredients are incorporated well and there's no big floury lumps. I do have a sifter, but honestly, it can be a pain in the butt to use, so I don't use it. One thing though, if you are someone that has had issues with making biscuits in the past, and I am one of those people, is making sure you're using really, really cold ingredients. So here I am using 2 sticks of butter that I actually had in the freezer. Now, I have learned that the cold thing was really my downfall. So putting the butter in the freezer has helped a lot. And then either shredding it or cubing it or something before mixing it in. You really want that like sandy texture when you add the butter, but it's so easy to overwork the dough that I like shredding it like this. That way there's very little I have to do to combine it with the dry ingredients. And then you're also gonna want about 2 cups of milk. Buttermilk is great with this, but if you don't have it on hand, any milk works just fine. I am using whole milk, but it's another situation. You want to make sure it's really, really cold. I like to measure it out and stick it into my freezer. That way it is super, super cold before I add it in. You can also see as I'm working this dough, I'm trying not to overwork it. I am just trying to get it to combine well. If you notice it's a little bit dry, add a little bit more milk, but I would rather have it be a little short of milk and have to add to it than having my dough too wet. And then you're going to want to flour your surface if it's your island or kitchen table or wherever you are making this. Just put some flour out and then add your dough directly to that. Once again, we are trying to not overwork this dough. So you're gonna notice that I am just going to pat it down into like a square shape, but we are not like kneading this dough. You don't wanna overwork it at all. And then this is where the magic happens. You're gonna want to either fold, or I personally like to cut this and then layer it on top of each other and pat it down. This is what's going to give you those flaky layers to your biscuits. So this is very important. I learned that cutting it makes it that I handle it less, and the less you handle it, the better it is. So I'm going to cut it, layer it, cut it, layer it, cut it, layer it. So I did it 3 times, and that'll make for a really fluffy, flaky, layerful biscuit. And then for my sheet pan, I take soft butter and I butter the whole bottom of it. This gives you a really delicious buttery crust at the bottom. So I'm just using my hands. If you guys want to use a little brush and do it, feel free. But when I'm baking like this, my hands are already gonna be dirty from messing with the dough and everything, so I'm not worried about a little butter on it. That is what the soap and water in the sink is for. But I do really like having this layer of butter at the bottom for those biscuits to sit on. Now I'm gonna use my super fancy biscuit cutter. Yeah, not so much. This is just a glass that I dip into the flour and use to cut out my biscuits. So if you don't have a fancy biscuit cutter, don't feel like you have to go out and spend whatever money on it. I'm sure it'd make it a little bit nicer, but I've just been using this glass honestly for years and years of me making biscuits, and it works just fine. Now, when you come to the point of having just all these little scraps from cutting it, I layer it again and try to get one last nice biscuit out of it. You're always gonna have the weird last biscuit, but I try not to mess with it too much, just layer it again and get one more cut. And then I end up just taking that last little remainder and kind of twisting it into its own weird little biscuit. Like I said, you're always gonna have that one biscuit at the very end that's just kind of a little funky looking, but it's still gonna taste just as delicious as the rest. I did preheat my oven to 350, so I'm putting these in the oven at 350 for about 30 minutes. And then at that 30-minute mark, I take them out and brush some butter on top of them. Now you can get creative with this step. If you want to add garlic and herbs or whatever to your butter when you are putting this on top, feel free. I personally love adding the garlic and herbs and all of that. The kids like it more simple and basic. So we go with simple and basic in this house of just some really good salted butter on top. But definitely if you want to get creative with it, by all means, go for it. Add some Italian seasoning and some garlic, a little bit of flaky salt on top will be absolutely delicious. And then back in the oven they go at 400 degrees for about 10 minutes. This is when you want to keep your eye on them to make sure they are coming out perfect and golden and not getting burnt. Usually it's about 10 minutes it takes. This is definitely one of those recipes though that I feel like for a lot of people seems so overwhelming, but it's really such a simple side to make. It is a bajillion times better than those biscuits you get in a can. So definitely make sure that this is a recipe you try out because it is amazing, and I guarantee everyone in your house or at your family get-together will be, one, impressed because these are beautifully layered and flaky, but also just excited about the flavor of your fresh biscuits. Well, that is all the recipes I have for you guys today. Hopefully you guys enjoy these. Let me know if you try any of them, and I'll see you guys Friday. Bye.